picture Odin for a second. Like, you're probably imagining a cosmic all-father in the sky.
Oh, absolutely. The whole, raven perched on his shoulder aesthetic.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe, I don't know, Anthony Hopkins with that golden eye patch from the
Yeah,
movies.
yeah.
It's just pure, clean mythology. Fiction goes in one box, and history goes in a completely separate one.
Right, which makes sense to us today. But what if you were actually looking at a real flesh and blood warlord, like someone who migrated from the Black
Which is
Sea?
a wild thought.
It is, and it immediately makes people uncomfortable. I mean, we prefer our myths to stay mythical,
Right.
but when you step into the world of early medieval history, that neat little categorization completely breaks down because early medieval writers and even 18th century scholars and ancient royal families, they didn't treat Odin as a god in the clouds.
Wait, really? So how do they treat him?
They treated him as a tangible ancestor, literally a historical founder who traveled from the East, leading this migrating elite.
Wow. Okay, which brings us to the mission for today's deep dive. Because we are basically opening up a historical cold case for you today.
We really are.
It's this massive investigation. We're drawing from sources that zero in on the core time frame of 250 to 500 CE.
Right, what historians call the migration period.
Exactly. And we're trying to answer this just completely wild question. Could the Norse god Odin actually be the mythologized memory of a real person? Or like a title, or a migrating military elite from the Black Sea frontier?
But we should probably establish the ground rules for this investigation immediately.
That's a good idea.
Because we are not looking to, prove Odin existed with absolute certainty. We're not expecting to dig up his driver's license or a birth certificate in a Swedish bog.
Right, like finding a passport that says Odin, occupation, all-father.
Exactly. That is
Yeah.
simply not how history works when you're dealing with antiquity. Instead, we're testing plausibility using a method called convergence.
Convergence. Okay, so what does that actually mean in this context?
It means we are asking if a historical Woden or Odin model is, well, far more plausible than modern skeptics claim. We do that by stacking everything together. Geography, archaeology, naming conventions, timelines. We stack them on top of each other to see if they form a coherent picture.
Okay, I love that. But if you're listening to this and thinking, this sounds like historical fan fiction, you aren't alone. For decades, historians thought the exact same thing.
Oh, totally.
So before we can genuinely look for a historical Odin, we have to clear away the lazy reasons people dismiss the idea entirely. We have to deal with the internet answer.
Ah, the internet answer. It's incredibly pervasive, honestly.
So what is the standard internet answer when this comes up?
Well, it basically argues that Odin was always a god, period. People will point out that medieval writers like Snorri Sturluson or Sacca Grammaticus were just Christian authors.
Right.
And they were engaging in this thing called euhemerism.
Which is stripping pagan gods of their divinity, right?
Exactly. Making them human kings so they become harmless to a Christian worldview. So skeptics argue the sources are centuries too late to be trusted.
Makes sense on the surface.
Yeah. And they'll also point out that the Roman historian Tacitus claimed the Germanic people worshipped Mercury. Plus, linguistically, the name Odin connects to Germanic root words for frenzy and madness. Ergo, case closed. Nothing to see here.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because it sounds like an airtight dismissal, but it fundamentally misunderstands how ancient memory works, doesn't it?
It really does.
Like, think of it this way. I find a 1990s VHS tape, and it contains a recording of a 1970s news broadcast. The tape itself is completely new, right?
Right.
But the information it holds is old. You have to separate the surviving physical source from the older tradition nested inside it. A late source does not automatically mean a useless source.
No, absolutely not. And what's fascinating here is that the Vinland sagas are actually the perfect parallel for this.
Oh, I love the Vinland sagas.
Right. For generations, the academic consensus was just that these sagas were written down far too late to be trusted. They were just oral traditions full of, fantastical elements.
Just stories about Norsemen sailing to some mythical North America.
Exactly. Until archaeologists actually excavated Lansomeros in Newfoundland. And they proved the Norse absolutely did reach North America centuries before Columbus.
Wow. So the sagas were right.
Well, they weren't literal step-by-step history, but they preserved a massive, undeniable historical core. Late sources might be weak for proving the precise date a battle happened, sure, but they are unparalleled for preserving memory and cultural reception and geographic tradition.
So just because a medieval Christian writer like Snorri euhemerized Odin, turning him into a human king, that doesn't mean Snorri just invented every single geographical and historical detail out of thin air.
Right.
But the internet answer basically notices the euhemerism, yells fake, and then entirely stops thinking.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens, because the mechanism we are actually dealing with is layered memory. It's never a simple equation where, like, a random guy rides a horse and suddenly everyone decides to call him a god.
Right, that would be ridiculous.
Exactly. Rather, a pre-existing god concept can absorb a powerful human memory over time. A real political title, or maybe a sacred office, can become personalized over centuries. A remembered dynastic lineage just gets compressed into a myth.
Okay, so if memory survives like a VHS tape, like we were saying, the obvious next step is to find the oldest tape we have.
Yes.
And that takes us to Rome in the 1st century, which sets up this incredible timeline mystery. It just completely fractures the standard narrative of Germanic paganism.
It really does.
Yeah.
So let's look at that Roman historian Tacitus, who was writing his ethnographic account, the Germania, in the 1st century CE.
Okay.
He goes to great lengths to detail Germanic origins, naming their core ancestral figures. He lists Tuisto, who is this earthborn god, and Manus, the ancestral progenitor of the people. He systematically names the ancestral tribes.
But notice who is missing.
Right.
Woden. Odin is nowhere to be found in that ancestral lineage.
Completely absent.
Tacitus gives us a fully named ancestral system, and Woden isn't the grandfather of it. Now, Tacitus does mention that the Germanic people worship a god he labels Mercury, using the Roman interpretive label.
Yes.
But he never uses the native name Woden.
Okay.
And Mercury is certainly not listed as the political founder of their kings.
Well, and Roman labels were famously elastic, you know? I mean, Julius Caesar called a native Gallic god Mercury as well.
Right.
It's basically an interpretive shorthand for any deity associated with travel or commerce or crossing boundaries. It is absolutely not a direct 1st century attestation of the fully formed, ruling all-father figure of Woden.
But then fast forward a few centuries to the Anglo-Saxon and Norse royal genealogies, and the landscape has completely changed. Woden is suddenly everywhere.
Everywhere.
He is the central dynastic ancestor. He's the literal grandfather of kings across these wildly different regions. And when historians calculate the generations backward in these genealogies,
This is the crazy part.
yeah, they place the life of Woden surprisingly close to the 250 to 500 CE migration period.
Right.
So why do so many separate traditions, from the royal houses of Anglo-Saxon England to Icelandic texts like the Heimskringla, why do they suddenly need Woden to be their political founder right around the migration period?
The massive question.
Did all these geographically separated people just magically invent the exact same grandfather at the exact same time?
Right, and that gap between Tacitus's 1st century account and the sudden explosion of medieval Woden genealogies, that is the core of our investigation.
Okay.
Because the 3rd to 5th centuries saw the old Eurasian frontiers absolutely shatter. The Goths, the Huns, the Alans, these massive confederations were moving across the continent.
The Roman frontier was just under catastrophic pressure.
Exactly. It was an era of profound societal disruption. It's the exact environmental pressure cooker capable of producing migrating military elites, new tribal confederations, and entirely new prestige identities.
Which brings us to the map. Because if a real elite warband became the basis for the Woden myth during that migration period chaos, where did they come from? And how did they physically get to Scandinavia?
Well, Snorri Sturluson's texts actually make a very specific claim about this.
Oh, what does he say?
They say Odin migrated from the east, specifically near the Black Sea, from a territory called Assaland or Swithiad the Great.
Okay, but historically, didn't scholars just wave this off as pure fantasy?
Oh, completely. They assumed it was just a clumsy medieval attempt to link the Norse gods to the prestigious ancient city of Troy.
Right, everybody wanted to be from Troy back then.
Exactly. But if you look at the physical geography of Eastern Europe, the Dnieper-Baltic river system was a tangible, historically viable superhighway.
Wow.
It connected the Black Sea world directly to Scandinavia. And this wasn't just some theoretical route. It involved actual river navigation, intense land portages where boats were literally dragged between waterways.
Ugh, that sounds exhausting.
Right. But there were tributary overlaps, coastal staging points, like the settlement of Valhalla on the island of Saaremaa in the eastern Baltic. It was a heavily functioning migration and trade corridor.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me, because I'm stuck on the linguistics of this geographic claim.
Oh, yes.
We aren't just talking about mythical fairy lands or vague directions anymore. The geographer Claudius Ptolemy, writing around 150 CE, which is just before this massive migration period kicks off, he mapped a real settlement in the exact right frontier corridor near Sarmatian territory in the east.
Yep.
And the Greek-Latin name he recorded for this place was Ezegarium.
Well, what's fascinating here is that in ancient geography, Greek and Roman cartographers constantly tacked suffixes like the Vatican onto local native names just to make them fit classical naming conventions.
Right.
So strip away that Lydium suffix, and the underlying native name is Azagar, or Asagar.
Azagar. Sitting perfectly on the Black Sea migration route, right where the myth says the Aesir came from, sounding uncomfortably close to Asgard. I mean, you cannot write off a 2nd century map coordinate that lines up that perfectly.
Well, we have to maintain our methodological rigor here, right? Finding Asagarium on a map does not definitively prove it is the literal Asgard of myth.
Fair enough.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, ancient geography frequently survives as distorted mythic memory. I mean, when a frontier collapses due to Hunnic or Gothic pressure, the physical cities burn and vanish.
Right.
But the names, the directions, and the prestige of those places survive in the oral tradition of the survivors. They get compressed over time into sacred geography. To find a name like Asagarium directly in the path of the proposed migration, right when the frontier was destabilizing, is a staggering piece of convergence.
Okay, but if Asagarium is on the map, shouldn't we see physical proof of people actually using the names Odin or Aesir in the real world before the Viking Age?
Yes, we absolutely should.
Because right now, we just have a dot on a map and a timeline gap. So let's drop right into the dirt of the Black Sea frontier and look for physical evidence of those names before they were ever Norse gods.
And the physical epigraphy is exactly where this theory gains massive traction. Let's start with the Aesir. In the east, we have the Tonyukuk inscriptions in Mongolia.
Okay.
These are 8th century stone pillars that record the ruling elite of the Turkic peoples, and they show a real Eastern prestige ethnonym that scholars reconstruct as resembling Aesir, or the Ashina.
Wow.
Yeah, and this exact phonetic pattern dominates the Eurasian steppe. Historical groups identifying as the Asi, the Az, and the Alani-Savasi existed across the steppe and Caucasus for centuries.
So it's a persistent S-associated prestige identity across the exact frontier corridors the Norse tradition points toward.
Exactly. But the real shocker is Odin himself.
Oh, this is my favorite part.
Yeah. We find something incredible in the Tanis and Bosporan kingdom inscriptions near the Black Sea. We find structurally similar names actually carved into stone. Od, Odin, Odon.
And they don't belong to cosmic sky gods, do they?
No. They belong to human beings living in a multicultural frontier setting long before Odin became the undisputed boss of the Norse pantheon.
It's like, I don't know, looking through a real 1930s census in Kansas and finding a regular guy named Clark Kent living on a farm.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Finding Od and Odan as human names in the Black Sea dirt means there was a real ambiguity phase where these were just names or maybe titles of leadership before they were mythologized by later generations.
Yes. This represents the human name problem for skeptics. We're not arguing that a mortal man named Odan, who carved his name into a rock in Tanis, is the literal god Odin who gave his eye for wisdom.
Right. That's not the claim.
We're demonstrating a mechanism. We're showing that Odin-like names existed in human inscriptional contexts in the exact geographic corridors where elite mobile war bands operated. And furthermore, that ambiguity phase physically travels.
Okay, tell me about that.
Later, up in Scandinavia, we find the Woden inscription on a rune stone in Strängnäs, near Lake Mälaren. That specific geographic area becomes the absolute heart of later Swedish power and Odin worship.
So the naming pattern moves exactly along the geographic route we've been tracking, from the Black Sea to the Baltic.
Exactly.
Okay, let's follow that movement. Because if an Eastern connected elite actually moved up those river highways into Scandinavia, they wouldn't just vanish into thin air upon arrival.
No, they wouldn't.
They would leave physical proof in the dirt.
Which brings us to the archaeological aftershock, the Vendel and Valsgard excavations.
Right. So in upland Sweden, which is remarkably close to Old Uppsala, the future epicenter of Scandinavian paganism, there is a sudden, massive explosion of elite boat graves directly following the migration period.
The Vendel age, right.
Yes.
Okay.
And the graves in these sites are not standard regional burials. They contain incredibly elaborate helmets, lamellar armor, intricate horse burials, and weaponry. Okay, but let me play skeptic for a second.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this and thinking, couldn't a wealthy Swedish chieftain just trade for some fancy Persian armor?
Sure.
Like, if you have money, You buy imported luxury goods. It doesn't inherently mean his ancestors migrated from the Black Sea or that he represents an incoming elite. Couldn't it just be normal Viking-era shopping?
It's a fair question, but the standard archaeological maxim applies perfectly here.
Hmm.
Trade explains possession, burial explains belief.
Ooh, I like that.
Right. You might trade for a beautiful foreign sword or an exotic helmet because it signifies wealth, but you do not bury your kings with random imported trinkets, and you certainly do not adopt completely foreign, elaborate ritual practices unless they mean something profound to your culture's core worldview.
So burying a warrior with his horse isn't just showing off wealth. It's a theological statement about what you think happens after death.
Precisely. These Vendel graves have striking martial parallels to Black Sea, Byzantine, Sasanian, and steppe nomadic styles. We see intensive horse warrior symbolism and elite rituals that look like they were lifted directly from the Eurasian steppe.
Wow.
Grave goods represent theology. They represent your expectations for the afterlife. So when you see a steady adoption of steppe nomadic burial rites in central Sweden, you are not looking at a medieval Amazon Prime delivery.
Right.
You are looking at the visible aftershock of an incoming elite ideology or a profoundly hybridized warrior culture taking root in Scandinavia. And the timing aligns flawlessly with the sudden appearance of Woden in the royal genealogies.
Okay, so we have the timeline, the map, the names, and the graves. They all line up. But we still have the ultimate hurdle.
How does the history actually become the myth?
Exactly. Let's say there was a real warlord or a migrating priest king or a sacred office from the Black Sea that arrived in Scandinavia during the Vendel Age. How does a real person or title transform into a magical god with a spear that never misses and an eight-legged horse?
Well, this raises an important question about how we view myth. The human-to-divine mechanism is historically standard. History is absolutely full of real people who were expanded into massive myths or worshipped as divine.
Like who?
Well, Imhotep was a real architect and official in ancient Egypt. Over centuries, he was elevated and worshipped as a god of healing and wisdom.
Oh, true.
Julius Caesar was a real flesh-and-blood dictator who was officially deified as Divus Julius by the Roman state after his death. Guan Yu was a historical Chinese military general who became worshipped as a god of war and loyalty.
And it doesn't even require full godhood to completely mythologize someone, does it?
No, not at all.
Like, look at the Germanic heroic epics. Attila the Hun and Theodoric the Great were real, historically documented migration period rulers.
Yes.
But fast forward a few centuries of oral tradition, and they are transformed into legendary, larger-than-life characters named Atli and Dietrich. Their real political actions were stripped away, replaced by dragons, magic swords, and pure myth.
Exactly. The leap from a migration period elite to a mythic figure is not just plausible, it's practically a sociological rule.
Okay.
But the real key to Odin is looking at his specific symbolic world. Odin is associated with ecstatic kingship, riding between worlds, spirit horses like Sleipnir, ravens serving as his eyes and ears, poetry, and commanding dedicated warbands.
Right.
That specific package of traits does not look like a standard Indo-European sky god.
Wait, how do the eight-legged horse and the ravens connect to a migrating elite? Because that sounds like pure fantasy to me.
It does until you look at Eurasian frontier ritual specialists and steppe shamans. Shamans across the Eurasian steppe used rhythmic drumming to enter ecstatic trances.
Okay.
In their cosmology, the drum is heavily metaphorized as a spirit horse that the shaman rides into the underworld or the spirit realm.
Wait, really? So the drum is the horse?
Right, exactly. Sleipnir, the eight-legged horse that Odin rides to the underworld, is a direct mythic parallel to the shamanic trance journey. The ravens, representing thought and memory flying out into the world, mirror shamanic spirit familiars. Odin's entire toolkit matches the profile of a Eurasian steppe ritual specialist almost perfectly.
So what does this all mean? Are we saying Odin was just a guy on a horse?
No, definitely not just a guy. It's a layered memory. Imagine a real migration period elite, a sacred office, or a priest-warrior lineage that moved north up the deeper Baltic highway, bringing steppe cavalry tactics and shamanic ritual practices with them.
Okay, I can picture that.
Over centuries of oral tradition, that historical memory fused with older existing divine traditions in Scandinavia, the myth acts as a pressure cooker. It compresses hundreds of years of real history, real migrations, and real political titles into one single cosmic figure. The god absorbed the history.
That is just incredible. When we strip away the 18th century pseudoscience and the internet conspiracy theories and the modern assumption that myths are just fiction, we're left with a stack of evidence that is incredibly hard to ignore.
Extremely hard to ignore.
We have the glaring timeline gap in Tacitus's first century account. We have the massive 250 to 500 CE migration period rupture that sent shockwaves across Europe.
Yep.
We have the physical Black Sea to Baltic River corridor. We have Ptolemy's Ezegarian map coordinates sitting perfectly on the frontier. We have the human Odd and Odin inscriptions in the dirt. And we have the sudden Vendale archaeological explosion in Sweden, featuring Sasanian and steppe nomadic martial styles.
They really do all stack perfectly on top of each other. The method of convergence is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. While we can't completely prove Odin was a single historical man, laughing the idea out of the room just ignores the realities of world history. The evidence demands we take the memory of Woden seriously. Dismissing the entire narrative as just medieval Christian invention or a series of random coincidences is no longer intellectually satisfying. The historical residue of a real migration is right there in the sources, waiting to be read.
It really is. So next time you read a myth or hear a fairy tale, ask yourself, what if you aren't reading about a god at all? What if you are reading the distorted, compressed memory of a forgotten ancestor hiding in plain sight? Something to mull over until our next deep dive. Thanks for learning with us.